Hello everyone, thank you for listening to my story. If you haven't fallen asleep yet, you might as well listen to this story, and maybe you will fall asleep soon. Before listening, please like and subscribe first. Of course, the premise is that you really like my content. If you have any thoughts or feelings, please leave a message below. Your opinions will really help me grow. Okay, enough chit-chat. Let's get started. The rain hit the tin roof like someone hitting your head with a hammer. As I rushed into the safe house through the puddles, my trouser legs were soaked and the rubber soles of my shoes slipped on the wooden floor. In the living room facing the door, Jack Marlowe from the Bangkok crime squad was half crouching, supporting himself with his left hand. The scar stretched from his wrist to his elbow like a faded centipede. He held a magnifying glass in his right hand, with the tip of his nose almost touching the floor. The scene won't lie. It's the living who lie. His voice was muffled in the rain. Look at these shoe prints. I looked in the direction of his finger. There were several clear rubber sole lines embedded in the gaps of the wooden floor, deep on the forefoot and shallow on the heel, as if they were left by someone who brakes suddenly when rushing in. The strange thing is that there is only this one set of footprints in the entire room, and there is no sign of leaving. The person disappeared out of thin air? I asked. Jack didn't look up and continued to measure the length of the shoe prints with a ruler. Lena Vera, a 23-year-old convenience store clerk, the only witness to the serial murders. She was placed here 3 days ago, and now there is no trace of her. He suddenly looked up, his eyes shining in the rain. Are you the profiler? I nodded. When the transfer order from the Dutch police department came down, I specifically looked up Jack Marlowe. My apprentice had died in a similar case 10 years ago, and ever since then, I only believed in physical evidence, not psychological analysis. His eyes were like he was performing an autopsy, and I could sense him judging. Why did this blonde, blue-eyed woman get to direct the Bangkok crime squad?
Miss Polliver.
He'd put the magnifying glass into the evidence bag. If you can, please don't touch anything. I retreated to the door. Rain and mist poured in through the open door, mixed with the smell of moldy wood and the tingling smell of disinfectant. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. There was no dust on the floor. The teacups on the coffee table were arranged so neatly, and even the cactus on the windowsill was facing the same direction. This room is so clean. I opened my eyes. It looks like it has been carefully tidied. Jack's eyebrows jumped. What's the problem with cleaning it? Someone comes to check the safe house every day. The person who checked it didn't align the rims of the teacups with the edge of the table. I pointed at the coffee table. There's tea stains on the bottom of the left cup, but not on the right one. Someone wiped it, but only wiped the right side. He didn't respond and turned to take a picture of the shoe prints. There were footsteps on the stairs. Rookie police officer Tony Lee rushed in, sweat dripping down his chin onto his uniform. Officer Marlowe, I really didn't sleep well last night. His Adam's apple moved up and down. I heard the sound of rain, and I heard myself snoring. But it was Miss Lena's room. I stared at his shirt. The third button was loose, and the thread was frayed. There were a few scratches on the left cuff, as if it had been hooked by something sharp. When he talked, his right hand kept touching his belt buckle, a typical self-soothing gesture. When was the last time you saw Lena? Jack asked. 10:30. I brought in some midnight snacks, and she was watching a Thai drama, smiling at me. Tony suddenly choked up. I checked the room at 6 this morning, and the door was locked, and there was no one inside. I took out my cell phone and quickly took 2 photos of his cuffs. He didn't notice and was still explaining to Jack. I swear I'm not lazy. Maybe there was a thief climbing through the window. There's no mud on the windowsill, I interjected. Tony's head snapped back to look at me, his eyes as big as frogs. Jack has gone up to the 2nd floor. As I followed him up, I heard him knocking on the wall with his baton. Dong, dong, dong. When it came to the 3rd board, The sound became muffled. "There's a problem." He pried up the edge of the wooden board with a dagger, and moldy ash fell down. When the secret compartment was fully exposed, I took a closer look. There were fresh friction marks on the rotating shaft, and a few strands of brown hair on the inner wall. "This is not a place to hide things." I touched the bottom of the secret compartment. "This is a temporary exit." Jack's scar twitched at the corner of his mouth. "Explain." "The rotating secret compartment needs to be pushed from the inside." I pointed to the scratches on the axis. "Lena may have climbed in by herself and pushed the board back." He did not refute, but took out latex gloves from his pocket and carefully checked the corners of the secret compartment. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, and the wooden beams above my head creaked as if someone was pacing on the ceiling. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we crowded into the monitoring room of the police station. The safe house only had a camera installed on the front door, and the rain curtain became white noise in the picture. Jack fast-forwarded to 2 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly the picture froze. A black shadow flashed in the lower right corner of the screen for 0.5 seconds, and even the outline could not be seen clearly. "Stop." I moved closer to the screen. The shadow's feet paused in the rain, and there was a cross line in the watermark left by the sole of the shoe. "Can it be enlarged?" I asked the technician. "Too much noise, blurry." I took out my sketchbook and started moving my pen across the paper. Rubber sole, 3 horizontal lines on the forefoot, and 2 diamond-shaped protrusions on the heel, exactly the same as the shoe prints in the safe house. "This is the same pair of shoes." I slapped the drawing paper in front of Jack. "The person in the surveillance video didn't leave. He entered the safe house, and then disappeared with Lena." Jack stared at the drawing paper, his Adam's apple moving. I shook my head. "Or maybe there is no such person at all." He looked up at me, the suspicion in his eyes fading a little. When I was packing up in the evening, my phone vibrated. The technical team sent Lena's cell phone location. The signal finally stopped in the Siam area. I stared at the red dot on the map. The outline of the Siam theater was vaguely visible in the rain and fog. "Miss Pavlova?" Jack stood at the door, holding 2 cups of iced coffee. "Would you like to have a drink together?" I took the coffee, and the water droplets on the wall of the cup flowed down through my fingers. Through the glass window, Tony Lee could be seen huddled at the end of the corridor, talking on the phone, his right hand still touching his belt buckle. "Fear is written in every wrinkle," I whispered into the fingerprints on the coffee cup. The fingerprints were arranged too closely, as if he had squeezed the cup until it was deformed while answering a phone call. The rain is still falling. There was thunder in the distance, mixed with the shrieks of sirens. I know there will be new wrinkles tomorrow, behind the curtain of the Siam theater, on the bloody insurance policy, in some carefully crafted lie. I turned my phone screen towards Jack. The blue dot of light was pinned on the map of Siam like a bleeding nail. "The last signal is in the theater." I turned off the screen. He tugged at the collar of his raincoat, and water dripped down his scar. "Be there before 3 o'clock." The abandoned Siam theater's iron door had a rusty lock, which he pried open with his baton. The musty smell came out with the rain, and when I stepped onto the steps, half a piece of dried mud stuck to the sole of my boot. Fresh, not soaked by the rain. The stage was covered with dust half a finger thick. Jack's flashlight swept across the tattered curtain, fine dust floating in the beam of light. "How long has it been since anyone came?" I squatted down. There were 2 parallel drag marks on the floor, extending from the backstage to the front of the curtain. The dust on the edges was rubbed rough. "Last night." His flashlight paused. "How do you know?" "Rainwater seeping in will cause the ash to clump together." I touched some with my fingertips. "This layer is dry. It has been walked on for less than 12 hours. He didn't respond and walked directly behind the curtain. The red velvet curtain was heavier than I had imagined. When I pulled it for the 3rd time, my fingertips suddenly touched something sticky. In the light of the flashlight, dark red marks seeped out from the folds of the curtain, like blood that had not been wiped off. "Pull over." Jack lowered his voice. I looked up. His flashlight was shining on the iron box at the foot of the wall. The lid of the box was half open, revealing half a piece of paper inside. The edge of the policy copy was stained with blood, and I pulled it out wearing gloves. The victim's name was Anu Songchai. The beneficiary was changed 3 days before the incident. The new beneficiary column read Surchai Songchai, distant nephew. The system can't find this person. Jack took out his phone and swiped it twice quickly. There is no one named Surachai in the Songchai family. I held the policy up to the light. The handwriting in the signature change column was the same as that in Lena's convenience store registration book, and even the last hook of the word guess was tilted to the left. She knew we would check. What? This name. I pointed to the beneficiary column. She wants us to believe that this person exists. His scar jumped. You mean, Lena is creating a scapegoat? I interrupted. Just like the intruder she created in the safe house. The rain beat harder on the roof. Jack's flashlight suddenly flashed on my face. Let's go to the flower shop first. Nita's flower shop smells like lilies. She was wrapping carnations, her fingers tightly wrapped around the green tape, and she adjusted the position of the same rose 3 times. Has Anu been seeing Lena a lot lately? Jack asked directly. She dug her nails into the flower stems, and the juice seeped out between her fingers. I don't know. You're scared. I held the back of her trembling hand. Every time you mention Lena, you move the rose 2 centimeters to the left. She looked up suddenly, tears in her eyes. They always quarrel. Lena said, "You are mine, and can only be mine." And Anu said that they wanted to break up. She laughed and said, "If I can't have it, I will destroy it." Jack's pen stopped on the notebook. "When did it happen?" "A week ago." She sniffed. Anu said she was like a madman, but I didn't dare to say. The wipers were running fast on the way back. Jack suddenly turned the steering wheel and stopped the car at the back door of the theater. Check again. The door to the secret room was hidden in the wall on the right side of the stage. When I used my fingernails to scratch open the gap, a musty smell mixed with rust rushed out. Jack shone his flashlight on the wall, and the 3 words scapegoat written in red paint were still dripping, as if they had just been painted. She wants us to think someone is forcing her. Jack touched the wall. The bloody words are new. Or maybe she really does. I stared at the 3 words. A histrionic personality will take a lie as the truth. He didn't respond and turned to walk out. The sound of the windshield wipers couldn't drown out his question. How do you remember the shoe prints in the safe house? I looked at the rain curtain outside the car window. The water marks on the glass were crooked, like the Motu 5-second shadow in the surveillance video. I'm just good at remembering details. He was silent for a long time, and then his cell phone rang. "Forensic doctor?" He pressed the hands-free key, and a vague male voice came from the rain. "The shoe prints in the safe house. Get to the point. The shoe prints belong to outsiders, but..." The sound of rain suddenly became louder and the signal was cut off. Jack gripped the phone until his knuckles turned white. I looked at his taut muscles beneath the scar, and suddenly remembered the strands of brown hair in the secret compartment of the safe house. Exactly the same color as the highlights of Lena's hair. The rain is still falling. Tomorrow, more wrinkles will be torn open. The phone screen vibrated so much in my palm that it felt numb. I stared at Jack's frown as he pressed the speakerphone button. The voice of the forensic doctor finally became clear in the rain. "The shoe prints are from an outsider, but the pressure distribution on the soles of the feet is wrong." "What do you mean?" Jack ran his thumb over the scar. "It looks like someone stepped on it on purpose." Anand's neutral voice carried the coldness of a laboratory. "The indentation on the forefoot is deep, and the heel is loose. It looks like he's imitating someone's walk, or in other words, performing for others to see." I squeezed the door handle. Jack suddenly turned his head, and the rain dripped down the brim of his hat, onto the back of my hand. You said the histrionic personality. Is it more like it now? She needs an audience. I looked down at my knuckles. The intruder in the safe house was the first act she wrote for us. The fluorescent lights in the interrogation room hurt my eyes. Tony Lee's police badge was tilted on his collar, and his Adam's apple rolled up and down 3 times before he spoke. I really didn't know there was something wrong with the money. I pushed the bank statement over. The remittance record of 500,000 Thai baht glowed coldly on the paper, and the payment was received 48 hours before Lena disappeared. Shell Company account, registered under a pseudonym. I typed the note of excellent guard bonus. You have been a police officer for 3 months. Have you ever received a bonus? He dug his nails into the cushions. They said that I kept it strictly, and that it was issued by the Bureau. When you lie, your pupils will dilate for 0.3 seconds. I stared at his trembling eyelashes. Your blinking frequency jumped from 15 times per minute to 28 times, and your breathing was 2.7 times per second faster than usual. This is not nervousness, but guilt. He suddenly covered his face and said, I just want to pay my mother's hospital bills. She is on dialysis in Chiang Mai. Who contacted you? I lowered my voice. He cried out from between his fingers. Text message. An anonymous number said as long as I don't lock the back window of the safe house. Content. Guard the safe house, and don't let her escape. He took out his cell phone, and the screen was lit with an undeleted text message, which was sent at 10:17 the night before Lena disappeared. I wrote in the number and looked up to see Jack leaning against the doorframe. His scar stretched out in a line in the shadows. Back in the office, Lena's social updates covered the desktop. I flipped through the pictures one by one. The moon taken while working the night shift at a convenience store, with the caption, "The Lonely Night Watchman." The back view of her squatting on the steps in the rainstorm, with the caption, "The Whole World is Forgetting Me." And 3 late-night monologue videos, in which she said to the camera, "Love to the extreme means possession," and the teardrop mole at the corner of her eye was shaking. Timeline. Jack held the pen in his mouth. She started posting photos of the theater frequently 3 months ago. He pulled out a photo. The red curtain was half open, with a gilded plaque with Siam Theater in the corner. I turned to the last photo, which was a selfie of her standing in the center of the stage. Half a wooden board was visible from the crack in the wall behind her. The pattern was exactly the same as the secret door we saw in the secret room. She's rehearsing. I scrolled the video progress bar to the front. The convenience store is the first act. The safe house is the second act. And the theater, it's the finale. Jack suddenly grabbed his coat. Let's go to the safe house again. The wooden floor was damp from the rain. I followed Jack to the secret door mechanism, and the rotating wooden wall creaked. When the musty smell came out, I squatted down and ran my fingers across the deepest part of the compartment. There was a piece of cardboard poking my fingertips. What? Jack's flashlight came closer. I picked up the piece of paper. The ink was blurred by the moisture, but the words, "The last scene, the scapegoat appears," were still clear. His breath brushed the back of my neck. So she didn't disappear. It was a costume change and curtain call. I looked up at him. The rain outside the window had stopped at some point, and the light flickered on his scar. She wants us to believe that a non-existent distant nephew forced her to do it, and I was a victim who was forced to do so. He finished for me, his throat rolling. But the beneficiary of the policy can be changed. She changed it herself. I put the shredded paper into the evidence bag. Just like these shoe prints, the remittance, and the bloody words, they are all scripts she wrote. The wooden wall was still slowly rotating. I stared at the uncleaned corners deep in the compartment, and there seemed to be more scraps of paper with white edges shining under the mildew. As Jack's flashlight swept over them, the fragments suddenly moved. It wasn't the wind, it was my fingertips shaking. "Tomorrow," I heard myself say. There will be more lines to be revealed. He said nothing, but clutched the evidence bag tighter. The light outside the window suddenly flickered, casting a patch of light on our overlapping shadows. My hand holding the tweezers didn't shake. The shredded paper under the mildew on the safe house's partition was so brittle that it broke into pieces as soon as the tip of the tweezers touched the edge. Jack came over with a magnifying glass in hand. There were still raindrops on the back of his neck from when he rushed into the house. Number 3. I pressed a fingernail-sized piece of paper onto the tape board. Here's lights out. He suddenly took away Lena's social updates, turning to the page of July 15th. She was in the photo standing in the theater audience, with the caption, "When the spotlight goes out, who remembers the people who take their bows?" Turning back to August 3. Applause is the best curtain, covering up all the truth. The scraps of paper on the tape board slowly connected into a line. The last sentence I spelled out made my fingertips clench. When the lights go out and the applause starts, no one remembers who the real actors are. She's writing her own script. Jack slapped the animation book on the wooden table, and rainwater seeped into the wood grain. From the convenience store to the safe house, all the scenes are designed by her. Amon's phone rang at this moment. The sound of the air conditioner in the laboratory leaked out from the receiver. The shoe print pressure value is out. He paused for 2 seconds. The force points of the soles of the feet completely overlap, as if the same person stepped on it 7 times repeatedly. Jack and I looked at each other. His Adam's apple moved, and the words he spoke sounded like sandpaper. The scene will not lie, but she will. I finished. The muscles beneath his scar twitched, and it was the same expression I had seen in the archives when his apprentice died in the line of duty 10 years ago. The kind of pain that came from being burned by the truth. Soravipa's convenience store is the third one at the end of the alley. The open light on the glass door flickered, illuminating the name on his work badge. His eyelashes fluttered as I slapped Lena's work file on the cash register. There are procedures for checking the surveillance. He lowered his head to wipe the counter, drawing circles on the coffee stains with his fingers. I glanced at his phone screensaver. A familiar figure in a yellow skirt at the entrance of a convenience store under the setting sun. Zooming in, you can see the blue headband at the end of the ponytail, exactly the same as the one in Lena's social photos. She always said, "To be noticed is to be alive." Sura suddenly spoke up and pulled out a yellowed surveillance screenshot from the drawer. In the picture, Lena grabbed the customer's collar, but her eyes were clearly looking at the camera. Once she deliberately spilled a hot drink on a guest, and afterwards said to me, "Look, they were all looking at me." The wooden door of Sam Theatre was not locked. In the dust that rose when Jack kicked at the door, I saw the stage curtain shaking. There was a tiny dressing room backstage with the door ajar, and the musty smell was mixed with the sweet smell of cheap lipstick. There were 3 wigs on the table, big chestnut waves, short black hair that reached the ears, and silver curly hair. Masks were piled in the corner, some with fox faces, some half masks, and some with crying faces, exactly the same as the one Lena wore in her social video. Judgment. I squatted down. The dust on the edge of the table was scraped into several deep scratches, which spelled out the English word judgment. The curvature of the fingernail was very familiar, just like the mark Lena made on the sign-in book when she punched in at the convenience store. She's not running away. I turned to look at Jack. His flashlight shone on the wig, casting a few swaying shadows. She's preparing for the end. When I got back to the office, the whiteboard was already filled with my writing. Histrionic personality was circled in red pen, paranoid tendencies was marked in blue pen, and 3 exclamation marks were drawn around the word scapegoat in the middle. She firmly believes that she is the victim. I tapped the note that read, "Change beneficiary," the insurance policy, the remittance, the bloody words. They are all props for the audience, and She arranged the audience. Jack stroked the stubble on his chin, his eyes falling on the shoe print in the lower right corner of the whiteboard. That was reproduced by me, based on the 0.5-second surveillance footage. The texture of the rubber sole is so clear that you can even count the teeth marks. He suddenly grabbed his coat. To the theater again. The overhead lights flickered on as we entered the auditorium. The strong light made me squint. When I got used to it, I saw something reflecting in the gap between the third row of seats. Jack walked over, his shoulders tense as he bent over. When he picked it up, I saw it clearly. It was a silver cufflink with tiny letters engraved on the surface, which shone so brightly under the light that it hurt my eyes. Top floor. He put the cufflinks into the evidence bag, and when he looked up, there was light in his eyes. Tomorrow morning. I didn't ask why. The rain started falling outside the window again, and the sound of it hitting the glass was like someone typing in Morse code. The word final on the whiteboard was swayed by the wind and fell in the shadow of the cufflink like an unfinished line. The iron door on the top floor is badly rusted. As Jack pried with his baton, I counted the scars on the back of his neck, the scars from a gang fight 10 years ago, which he always called badges for idiots. The sound of metal rubbing against each other hurts my ears. I leaned in first, and the smell of mold and rust came out. There was a dark shadow in the corner. Only when I got closer could I see that it was a remote camera, and the lens was facing the stage downstairs. Jack squatted down and knocked on the floor. Empty. The microservers are hidden in the mezzanine. My hands were shaking a little when I called up the storage records. The moment a timestamp popped up, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. 23:17 on June 15, 2023 was the time when Lena disappeared in the safe house. Play button pressed. The safe house in the picture was glowing with a cold white light. Lena was wearing the light blue nightgown she had worn that night, and standing in front of the revolving partition at the base of the wall. She smiled at the camera, her lip gloss bright and eye-catching. Did you see? I am the center of the story. The compartment swung open with a click. She bent down and crawled in, moving like a cat. The camera angle was just right to capture the crack in the door. Her fingertips finally swept across the door frame, leaving a red streak on the wood. It was unclear whether it was lipstick or blood. She had it all planned out. Jack's voice was as hoarse as sandpaper. Even the placement of the cameras was planned out. The fluorescent lights in the police interrogation room are so bright that they give me a headache. Nita's knuckles turned white as she twisted the straps of her canvas bag. My brother's diary. When she took it out, a piece of the leather cover fell off, revealing the pencil marks underneath. It was Lena's name, crossed out again and again. I turned to a page in the middle. The smudged ink read, Lena said that the price of betraying her is to make everyone remember her pain. There were slight rough edges on the page, as if it had been repeatedly pulled out and stuffed back in. She has read this diary. I closed the book, and Nita looked up suddenly, her eyelashes fluttering like a frightened butterfly. She has turned every page and used these words to write her revenge script. She burst into tears. I should have said it earlier. She always came to the flower shop, stood in front of my brother's photo and smiled, saying, "He will soon belong to me alone." When Wachero was brought in, the back of his neck was still stained with the smell of cigarettes from the internet cafe. He stared at the coffee cup on the table, his eyes as if he was reading code. She paid for the fake identity, the altered insurance policy, the misaligned location, he said. I was just one of the parties involved in the transaction, but his computer cache doesn't lie. When I pulled up the remaining encrypted video, his Adam's apple moved. Lena in the picture is wearing a costume with eye makeup so thick that it looks like a knife. They must believe that I am a victim. Otherwise, what's the point of me acting for so long? She needs an audience. I paused the video at the moment of her screaming, and we, including you, are the audience she chose. Wakila said nothing. His knuckles were clenched white under the table. This was a typical reaction of being hit on the mark in micro-expressions. When I got back to the office, the whiteboard had been filled up with my writing again. Histrionic personality was circled in red. Manipulativeness was marked in blue. and the scapegoat in the middle was drawn as a clown's face. She's not the murderer. I turned to look at Jack, who was staring at the victim testimony in the evidence cabinet. It was recorded on the day Lena was placed in the safe house. She is the director. We are just extras in her script. Jack didn't object. He walked over, took out the testimony disc, and put it into the projector. Lena's voice floated out, with just the right tremor. I didn't see anything. I was so scared.
Now it sounds like I'm reciting lines, he said, rubbing his fingertips along the edge of the disc. 10 years ago, my apprentice believed in this kind of fear, and chased into the alley and was stabbed. I didn't respond. The rain started falling again, and the sound of it hitting the glass was like someone beating a drum. Lena's drum. We set up the theater. The stage was set up like a safe house, with the partitions open and a set of contradictory shoe print models on the floor. The projector was set up on the third row, playing the video of Lena's disappearance in a loop. The moment the lights dimmed, I heard movement behind the curtain. You finally understand. Lena's voice was like honey mixed with glass shards. She walked out from behind the scenes, wearing the light blue nightgown she had worn that night, with the same silver cufflinks hanging around her neck, exactly the same ones we found in the audience. I am the only witness and the only real murderer. She spread her arms and turned around, her hair sweeping across the curtain. How is it? Is this scene perfect? Jack's handcuffs flashed in the light. I stared into her eyes, just like in the surveillance screenshots Sora gave me. She was looking at the camera, at all possible audiences. The stage lights suddenly came on. Her shadow was cast on the curtain, like a stretched puppet. It's time for the curtain call. Jack's voice was low. Lena didn't move. She looked into the darkness of the auditorium, a smile still on her face. As I turned around, I caught a glimpse of an old suitcase in the corner backstage. It was dark brown, with rust on the buckle, revealing a bit of red underneath, like the satin of a costume. The curtain swayed in the wind, making the shadow of the suitcase flicker. I squatted in the backstage corner. The luck of the old suitcase rubbed my fingertips so hard that they hurt. When I applied force, rust fell off. When the lid of the box was opened, a musty smell came up, and on top was a photo. Two girls in school uniforms were arm in arm with each other in front of a faded red curtain. The one on the left is Lena, and I've never seen the girl with short hair on the right. "Annan, check this person," I said to the phone, holding the photo in front of the camera. The sound of flipping through documents rustled on the other end of the phone. Marina Suka, Lena's classmate in high school, is now a stage actor at the Siam Theater. My phone suddenly vibrated. Songchai's name popped up, and I switched to speakerphone. "Marlo, pull over." The detective's voice was like sandpaper grinding iron. "The media has found out about the safe house. The headline says, 'Police can't even keep witnesses.' If there is no progress by noon tomorrow, the case will be transferred to the Special Investigations Unit. They want the closing report, not the truth." Jack slammed the evidence bag onto the dressing table, causing the glass bottle to make a crisp sound. I didn't respond and started looking through Lena's social media archives. She had liked 7 posts in the past 3 months, 6 of which were promotions for Marina's performances. Marina's home is in an old building in Thumbury district. I rang the doorbell 3 times. The door opened a crack, and a woman stuck her head out. She had dark circles under her eyes, as if she was wearing smoky makeup. "Looking for me." "Lena Vera." I held up the photo. "Do you know her?" Her pupils shrank and she was about to close the door. I leaned against the door frame. She said, "In the theater, life is a play. You played opposite her." The door opened, and as Marina turned around, I caught a glimpse of the camera on the coffee table. We were rehearsing Medea in our senior year. She fished out a cigarette and the lighter clicked 3 times before it lit up. She played Medea, and I played the nanny. At the curtain call, she grabbed my hand and said,
Life is a play, and I want to be the protagonist forever. She clicked on the camera. The picture is shaking badly. It's the backstage of the theater. Lena, wearing a white dress, screamed at the air, "Help!" Someone broke in. She slammed into the wall of the mezzanine, her nails scratching white marks on the wooden board, and suddenly laughed. "They will believe it. They will find a scapegoat." She came to me last week to borrow her costumes. Marina put out her cigarette. She said she wanted to play the last and most important part. I didn't ask because I was afraid. The stage lights came on with a bang. Jack connected the projector to the laptop, and Lena's face was enlarged on the screen. The surveillance in the safe house. She touched the partition with her back to the camera. The bloodstains in the secret room of the theater. She held a knife and scratched scapegoat on the wall. The mobile phone screen was on. She sent an anonymous remittance message to Tony. "She's not running away." I pointed to the paused screen. Lena's eyes were facing the surveillance camera. She wants us to see every step of her design. The footprints, the compartments, the insurance policy are all clues to the audience. Marina suddenly grabbed my wrist, digging her nails into the flesh. She also said that besides the police, there must be someone else who believes that she is a victim. But I've never seen that person. I looked up suddenly. The lighting control console is 3 meters above the stage, with an iron ladder covered in rust. Jack called up the surveillance records. Last night at 10 o'clock, there was a remote operation record on the console, but no user was registered. The spotlight shone down. Dust was floating in the beam of light, and in the center was a dark brown director's chair. The seat of the chair was polished to a shine, and there was a silver headband wrapped around the armrests. Exactly the same headband that Lena wore on the night of the murder. I tiptoed towards the ladder. The metal armrests were freezing cold. When I looked up, the shadow of the director's chair swayed on the ceiling, as if someone had just stood up from it. I grabbed the rusty ladder, the coolness of the metal running through my fingertips and into my bones. Jack shouted from below, "Be careful with the pedal." I didn't respond, but stared at the director's chair above my head. The shiny part of the seat was exactly the mark left by my buttocks pressing on it for 10 years. The headband was swaying on the armrest. It was the one Lena wore last night. The silver sequins sparkled in the beam of light, like a pair of eyes staring at me. The drawer of the console was stuck. I used my fingernail to pry open a gap, and a musty smell mixed with ink came out. Inside lay a piece of sticky note paper, its edges curled up like a dead leaf. I recognized the handwriting above. It was Lena's. She always liked to draw a small circle on the right side of the word "thank you." "Thank you for always watching me." The last signature is voila, and the ink is darker than the previous ones, as if it was deliberately traced. Who is this? Jack's shadow loomed over, holding the theater's surveillance records in his hand. I held the note up to him. Voila is Lena's social account. I pulled up the data analysis on my phone. The blue light of the screen made his scar turn blue. The fan who suddenly became active 3 months ago has an IP address that completely overlaps with Lena's cell phone base station. Being a fan of yourself? He raised his eyebrows. More than that. I scrolled through the social media page. Likes, comments, private messages asking for updates. She used 10 small accounts to take turns playing the role of the audience, and Vala was the most active one. I tapped the note with my knuckles. Like now, she wrote a thank you letter to herself in Vala's name. The ladder suddenly shook. Song-In stood in the audience, his hand like dry bark grasping the bottom of the ladder. "Do you want to go to the underground passage?" His voice was as light as the wind sweeping across the curtain. Lena's frequent lounges behind the prop warehouse. The entrance to the passage was hidden under the floor on the right side of the stage. In the dust that rose when the wooden board was lifted, I saw Song-In's shoes. The pattern of the shoes was exactly the same as the rubber-soled sneakers in the safe house in the surveillance video. He noticed my gaze, lowered his head and tugged at his trouser legs. These are for cleaning the theater. We received 20 pairs last year. The police station's safe house also ordered the same style. The door to the lounge was made of iron and had a rusty lock.
The Songin took out a bunch of keys, and as soon as the smallest one was inserted into the keyhole, it opened with a click.
The moment I pushed open the door, I took a half step back. The walls were covered with photos of Lena, from stills of her playing Medea in high school, to her profile captured by surveillance cameras while working in a convenience store, and there was even a blurry photo of her squatting in the corner of the safe house, digging her fingers into the cracks in the wall. She always said that she was the real protagonist. Song-in's finger ran over a newspaper clipping, which was a report on a serial murder case 3 months ago. I once ran into her talking to the mirror, saying, "If no one remembers me, then it's like I never existed." He pointed to the draft of the script on the table, with "The Disappearing Witness" written on the cover. She asked me to help find the mezzanine drawings of the old theater, saying that she wanted to design the most perfect exit. Jack was flipping through the script and suddenly stopped at a certain page. I leaned over and saw written on it in red pen, Act 3. The police discovered clues about the scapegoat, and the audience exclaimed. Act 4. The protagonist took off his mask, and the audience held their breath. So the footprints, insurance policies, and remittances are all lines she wrote. My throat tightened. She needs an audience, and she needs us to follow her script. When we returned to the police station, the technical team had just finished sorting out Lena's personal belongings. A manila envelope lay in the evidence bag. The seal was loose and half of a card was visible. I pulled it out. On the front was a withered white rose. On the back was a crooked handwriting. Thank you for watching my show. Now it's your turn to decide the ending. Jack came over to see Scar's face jumping up and down under the light. Is she taking credit? No. I turned the card over and over. She's confirming that we remember this scene, confirming that we will discuss her and judge her. My fingertips traced the word ending. The ink was not completely dry yet. Just like she said when she played Medea in high school, life is a play, and I want to be the protagonist forever. It started to rain outside the window. The raindrops hit the glass, turning the neon lights into blurry blocks of color. I stared at the headband in the evidence bag and suddenly remembered what Marina said. In addition to the police, there must be someone else who believes that she is a victim. But until now, we haven't found that person. Maybe there is no such person at all. All she needs is an audience. The trial will be tomorrow. Jack put the evidence bag into the safe. She's waiting in the interrogation room. I was looking at the rain outside the window, and a thought suddenly popped into my mind. Was she really just acting? Or was it that when she was smiling at the surveillance camera in the safe house and carving scapegoat on the wall of the theater, she had already lost the distinction between reality and reality? The lights in the interrogation room should be on, right? She was sitting on an iron chair, perhaps smiling at the one-way glass. Just like all the protagonists waiting for their curtain call, the lights in the interrogation room were blindingly white. When I pushed open the door, Lena was tilting her head to look at the one-way glass. The ends of her hair were wet, as if she had not wiped them dry on purpose. Even the curve of her hair was exactly the same as the woman who smiled at the camera in the safe house surveillance. You finally understand, right? She turned back, her lips curled up just the right way, as if to say goodbye. Those footprints, insurance policies, and remittance slips are all the lines I wrote. Jack slammed the evidence box on the table. The scar on his left hand was throbbing with blue veins, left by a gang fight 10 years ago. I always felt that the scar contained an obsession heavier than the rainy season in Bangkok. I didn't answer and pressed the projector remote control. The screen flashed and the lighting control room of Siam Theatre appeared. Lena in the camera was wearing a black sweatshirt, gesturing at the air, her voice shrill and trembling. The police will find clues to the scapegoat, and the audience will exclaim, She suddenly stopped, grabbed the script next to her, and threw it to the ground. Not enough. This is not a climax. You're practicing. I turned off the projection, practicing how to make us the audience. Lena dug her nails into the edge of the chair. So what? When she raised her eyes, the teardrop mole at the end of her eye was raised. Aren't you also very engrossed in watching? The door was pushed open. Inspector Songchai squeezed in with a stack of reports, the police badge on his shirt, dazzling. The shoe prints matched the rubber soles of the safe house. He pushed his glasses, flipping through the pages. The blood on the theater curtain is from your ex-boyfriend, the shell company that transferred the money found, an overseas account under your name, social data. He paused, slapped the last piece of paper in front of Lena. You have been operating the poor witness persona for 3 years, and even calculated the surveillance angle of the convenience store. I have signed the case closing report. Songchai nodded to Jack. It can be handed over to the prosecutor's office. Jack didn't move. He stared at Lena, his Adam's apple rolling. You killed 5 people just for us to watch a show. Lena smiled. Her smile slowly spread over her entire face, like a cup of honey that could not be melted, so sweet that it tasted bitter. My boyfriend said he wanted to break up with me. Her voice suddenly became as light as a sigh. He said, Lena, we are just an underground relationship, stop it. She turned to Nita. At some point, the flower shop owner was standing at the door, holding half a rose that had not been sold in his hand. Your brother said he wanted to change the beneficiary to your nephew, but in fact he wanted to completely erase the traces of my existence. Song-in only remembers the old blueprints of the theater. She looked at the theater manager, huddled in the corner. Marina said, You're just a witness. Who would remember you? Finally, she turned back to us, the light of the interrogation lamp flickering in her pupils. Only you would check footprints, watch surveillance and analyze scripts for me. She tapped the table with her fingers. You remember me, right? I stood up. The sound of the chair legs scraping across the floor was like a crack. You don't have to be a murderer. I took out a business card from my pocket and pushed it to her. Psychological intervention, community support. I can help you rebuild. Her fingers were hovering over the card, shaking violently. I saw an old scar on the inside of her wrist, exactly the same as the one revealed in the convenience store surveillance video when she was wiping the counter. I thought it was a burn then, but now I understand that it was the word protagonist that she had carved, but did not finish carving. No need. She suddenly withdrew her hand, and her smile became perfect again. I have already written the curtain call scene. The rain has stopped. Jack's leather shoes made a squeaking sound as they stepped through the puddles. I followed him to the police station entrance, the neon lights casting mottled light on his scar. Do you think she will change? I asked. He took out a cigarette and put it out, as if he remembered something. She needs the audience. He looked at the extinguished theater sign in the distance. Now that the audience has dispersed, maybe we should change the script. I turned around and walked back. The filing cabinet was at the end of the corridor, and Lena's file bag was still spread out on the table. Half a page of yellowed letter paper appeared from the bottom layer of craft paper. The ink was blurred by water, and the word Mom could be vaguely seen. That was the last line she did not say in the interrogation room. I squatted on the metal steps of the archive room, my fingertips running over Lena Vera's file. Under the bottom layer of craft paper, half a page of letter paper looked like a dead leaf, with the edges wrinkled by water. The word Mom emerged from the blurred ink. As I pulled it out, an even older piece of letter paper fell to the ground. It was signed Walla, but the handwriting I squinted against the overhead light. At this time, my photographic memory is like a scalpel, which can break every stroke of the pen into its parts. This is Lena's own handwriting. The curve of each stroke is exactly the same as when she wrote the receipt in the convenience store surveillance video. You are the only one who understands me. The last line of words was traced over and over again, and the back of the paper was torn. She even has to play the role of audience herself. Jack's shadow fell over them. He held the folder in his hand, his knuckles pressed against the word Farah. Who is Farah? I shook my head. I checked her social connections, and there's no one named Wala. The phone vibrated in my pocket. Marina Suka's name popped up, with the note, Lena's high school classmate, stage actor. The last time she was interrogated, she shrank into a chair and said, I don't remember anything. Now her voice was filled with tears. Miss Jane, I want to see you. Now, the windows of the cafe were fogged by rain. Marina twisted the tissue between her fingers, her nails painted blood red, the same color as the theater curtain. 3 days ago, she came to see me. She suddenly slapped a crumpled note on the table. She said, This is the prologue of the big show, and you are the first witness. The words on the note were crooked. If no one remembers me, I will kill myself. They fished out my magnifying glass. The ink was mixed with fine sand, matching the texture of the theater backstage floor. Marina's Adam's apple moved. She was laughing. It's like reciting lines. Jack's cell phone rang. Song and Ratana's voice came out from the speakerphone. I'll show you something. The lock on the back door of the theater was badly rusted. Songin poked the door 3 times with the key, and it creaked open. He turned on the flashlight and the beam swept across the base of the wall. When the theater was built, the owner was afraid that the Japanese would investigate, so he built a secret passage. He pushed the 3rd red brick, and the muffled sound of gears turning came from the cracks in the wall. The secret passage was choking with a musty smell. Jack's leather shoes stepped into the puddles, and the sound was like knocking on a coffin lid. After walking 20 meters, Song-Yen suddenly stopped. The flashlight swept across the front. It was a safe house. Wooden floors, faded curtains, and leftover instant noodle buckets piled in the corner. The walls are covered with photos of Lena. CCTV screenshots of convenience store checkout counters, social media selfies, and even photos of her working backstage at the theater 3 years ago. In the middle is a newspaper clipping with the headline, Witness of Bangkok Serial Murders Missing, and the date 3 days ago. She has been practicing here for half a month. Song-En's voice trembled. I heard her talking to the air, imitating your tone. They said the footprints were inconsistent. They said the profile was unreliable. He pointed to the floor. Look, these rubber-soled shoe prints, exactly the same as the ones at the safe house. Jack squatted down, his fingertips brushing the edge of the shoe print. She stepped on it herself. When he looked up, Scar jumped in the flashlight. She even rehearsed her disappearance in advance. Inspector Somkai's office was lit with a cool white light. He pushed the phone towards him, and on the screen was a news preview. The truth behind Bangkok serial murders revealed. The witness turned out to be the real murderer. The message was sent at 2 in the morning. The special investigation team will arrive tomorrow. He checked his watch. You have 8 hours. I clutched the note Marina gave me. She has a backup plan. Check her phone backup. Jack suddenly said. Last time the technical department said there was a video that was overwritten. The computer screens in the police station's technical room glowed blue. When the recovery software popped up the complete prompt, I heard the sound of my heartbeat. In the video, Lena is wearing off-white casual clothes and sitting in front of a plain background cloth. She was not wearing any makeup, and the teardrop mole at the end of her eye looked very faint. If you see this, it means that I was not successful, or I was too successful. She smiled, and it was different from the perfect smile in the interrogation room. It was more like the gentle smile of handing an extra straw to a regular customer during the night shift at a convenience store. So, how would you write my ending? The screen went black. I turned off the player and looked up to see the night view of Bangkok outside the window. The neon lights cast blurry spots on the glass, just like the interrogation lights flickering in Lena's pupils. Is this really the end? There were footsteps in the corridor. I recognized them as Dr. Lim's Oxford shoes. The soles smelled of disinfectant. He walked past the technical room with a pile of documents in his arms and glanced at me. "Remember to pick up the assessment report tomorrow morning." I watched his back disappear around the corner. Assessment report. Will Lena's mental state be clearly stated in it? The phone vibrated in my palm. It was a message from Jack. "Go to the interrogation room. She wants to see you." I stood up holding my phone. The lights in the corridor flickered, stretching my shadow very long, just like the silhouette behind the theater curtain waiting for the curtain call. At 3 o'clock in the morning, rainwater leaked into the blinds of Dr. Lin's office, leaving dark stains on the cover of the evaluation report. I held the coffee cup, and the bottom of the cup made a slight sound as it hit the wooden table. She started speaking in the third person. Dr. Lin pushed his gold-rimmed glasses and called up the surveillance video. In the picture, Lena was curled up in the corner of the interrogation room, digging her nails into the concrete wall. Wara said that the footprints were made by her. Vala said that she found the compartment in the safe house. Jack put the coffee cup heavily on the table. I'm pretending. 10 years ago, I interrogated a fraudster who could recite the entire diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia. But this time is different. Dr. Lin pointed to the screen. Her voice changed by 27 hertz, and the frequency of her Adam's apple trembling is consistent with the characteristics of personality transformation. He flipped through the record book. Yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she suddenly asked me, "When is Vala's birthday?" And Lena's birthday can be found on the computer. I leaned in to look at the surveillance screenshot. The teardrop mole under Lena's left eye flickered in the shadows. She was different from the one handing straws to regular customers in the convenience store surveillance video, and the one staring at the insurance policy behind the theater curtain. "She needs someone to confirm who she is," I heard myself say. Jack's scar jumped, and just as he was about to retort, the office door was kicked open. Anna rushed in holding the DNA report, the hem of his white coat stained with the blue reagent from the laboratory. "The comparison results are out." Lena's mitochondrial DNA showed that she had a fraternal twin sister. He said in a tight voice, "Only one child is registered on the birth certificate, and the other may have been given up for adoption." Jack snatched the report. "So she made up Vara?" "No." I stared at the comparison chart in the report. "She may really believe that sister exists." The smell of disinfectant in the corridor suddenly became strong. I stood at the door of the ward holding Lena's childhood photo album. The door was not locked, and she had her back to me, scratching the window glass with her fingernails.
"Miss Jane." She didn't turn around. Her voice was like cotton wool soaked in water. "Vara said you would bring a mirror."
I put the mirror on the bedside table. The mirror reflected her pale face, with the teardrop mole on the left, half an inch away from the teardrop mole under her right eye in my memory. "Vala isn't here," I said. She turned around suddenly, her nails scraping against the glass, making a harsh sound. "You lied to me."
"You said you would always watch me."
She rushed to the mirror and slammed her fingertips on her own image. Vala said she would go to trial for me, go to jail for me, for me to make everyone remember me. I opened the photo album. The third page is a faded photo. A little girl with pigtails standing in front of a dressing mirror, but she is the only one in the mirror. There was pencil writing on the back. Nana said her sister was playing with her in the mirror, but there was only Nana in the mirror. The diary fell to the ground and I squatted down to pick it up. The page, dated March 15, 1998, was soaked with water. The doctor said Nana had hallucinations, but she cried and said her sister was taken away. I counted the cradles, and there was only one bottle. The glass suddenly cracked. Lena pressed her forehead against the mirror, tears streaming down the cracks. I saw in the mirror that her shadow was divided into two. The one on the left was biting her lips and not speaking, and the one on the right had her mouth open, as if shouting something. "Miss Jane." She suddenly became quiet, and when she turned around, the teardrop mole returned to the area under her right eye. "Can you put the mirror away for me?" Vala doesn't want to see me today. I picked up the mirror. The two shadows in the cracks overlapped like two drops of melted ink. The lights in the holding cell flickered at the end of the corridor. Jack sent a message. She asked to see you alone. I turned around holding the mirror. Raindrops dripped along the windowsill onto the cracks in the mirror, making the two shadows even more blurred. The iron door of the detention room creaked open. My hands, holding the notebook, were sweating. Lena was sitting on a plastic chair with her back straight, like an actor waiting for her curtain call. "Do you think I will be found guilty?" She spoke, the ending of her voice as light as a spider silk floating in the air. I stared at the teardrop mole under her right eye. Just now in the hallway mirror, it was still on the left. The chain of evidence is complete. I turned to the last page of the transcript. Eyewitness testimony. Fiber residue in the safe house partition. Bloody fingerprints on the theater curtain. So there will be a verdict. She smiled, the curve of her lips as precise as if it had been measured with a ruler. But you just paused for 0.3 seconds. She tapped the table with her fingers. Before you said the chain of evidence is complete, my throat tightened. This is her usual trick, using micro-expression analysis to counter the profiler. You can also choose to tell the truth. The truth? She tilted her head, her hair brushing across her collarbone. That's the most exciting ending. She suddenly reached out and touched the back of my hand, her fingertips as cold as ice. "Do you think Vala will stand up and speak for me in court?" The iron door was pushed open again. The prison guard nodded at me. "Time's up." Lena retracted her hand and hid it in her sleeve. As I stood up, her voice followed me. "Remember to watch today's press conference." Inspector Somchai's speech cast a glaring light on the projector. When he pounded the table to emphasize that the police solved the case efficiently in 72 hours, Jack's chair was empty. I looked down at my phone and just received a message from him. I went to the hospital. Anand said a copy of Lena's birth certificate was found in the archives, dated March 5th. At the end of the press conference, I found Jack in the major crimes office. He was putting Selena's interrogation record into the evidence box. The seal was stained with coffee stains. "This is not a commendation ceremony." He loosened his tie, and his scar rose and fell as he swallowed. "The idiot who always said the scene won't lie now believes it. The people who are best at lying are the ones we want to protect." He pushed the box to me, and when he turned around, the police badge brushed against the corner of the table, making a small sound. "Nita's flower shop is closed." Through the glass I saw her cleaning up the floral mud, her white apron stained with blood from the rose thorns. She saw me, pointed to the leather envelope on the windowsill, lowered her head again, and twisted her apron strings with her fingertips. I don't know anything, really, but her hands were shaking when she handed over the letter. Inside the envelope was a yellowed letter paper, with ink smudged into light blue flowers. "Nana." When I saw the tumor in the physical examination report, my first thought was to be thankful. This way you won't have to fight your family for me. If you really love me, please let yourself go. You always say there is another you in the mirror, but every time I look at you, I only see you. When I rushed into the detention room holding the letter, Lena was staring at the mold on the wall and counting the squares. "Your brother wrote it." I spread the paper in front of her. Her fingers stroked the word Nana, and she suddenly laughed out loud. Tears fell on the letter paper, turning the words "let go of yourself" into a blurry blue. "He always says I'm acting," she sniffed. "But this time, I'm not acting this time." I stared at the blinking cursor on the last page of the profile report for 10 minutes. As he typed the last line, the rain outside the window hit the glass. She did not come to kill, but to exist. We need more people like me, who can see the souls that are about to disappear. The champagne glasses at the celebration party clinked overhead, emitting sparks like broken diamonds. Jack leaned against the window, the second button of his police uniform unbuttoned, revealing the end of his scar. "Do you think she will come back?" I held the untouched juice, the ice cubes clinking at the bottom of the glass. He looked at the rain outside the window. Maybe she never left. The sound of sirens came from the distance, getting closer and closer, like some kind of response. When the show was over, Dr. Lin held me back. Half of a mental evaluation form was exposed in the pocket of her white coat. Lena was in a very stable state today, and actively cooperated with the test. She lowered her voice, but she slipped something into my pocket while I wasn't paying attention. I spread out my palms. It was a crumpled piece of paper, the edges stained with the prison's distinctive blue ink. The words on it are crooked, like they were written by a child. Dr. Lin's fingers trembled on the back of my hand. She stuffed it in here. She pulled her hand back, and there was still a half-filled assessment form bulging out of her white coat pocket. I checked her prison uniform, and there was nothing else. The note was wrinkled like a crumpled blue cloud, and the edges were stained with the prison's unique blue ink. The handwriting was crooked and 2 sizes smaller than Lena's, like it was written by an elementary school student with his left hand. She's back. When I rushed into the detention room holding the note, Lena was squatting in the corner, counting the mold spots in the gaps between the floor tiles. The iron door clanged, and she looked up, with tears still lingering at the corners of her eyes from the celebration party. "Who wrote this?" I slapped the note in front of her. She used her fingernails to pry open the wrinkles, and suddenly laughed, her voice like a rusty key. "You finally believe it? You didn't make up Vala. She's always there." Her pupils shrank into pinpoints. In the mirror, in the compartment of the safe house, backstage, at the theater. She suddenly leaned close to the iron railings, her fingertips against the glass. "The insurance policy you saw on my phone that day was torn up by her. The blood is mine. The words are hers." I took a half step back. The fluorescent light in the detention room cast a bluish-gray shadow on her face. How could she still be as cowardly as a convenience store clerk? "Go check Dr. Lin's recording." Her voice suddenly became sickly sweet. "She didn't tell you what I said when I was sleepwalking. Dr. Lin's office is locked." I knocked on the door 3 times before she poked half of her face out from the crack of the door. The second button of her white coat was buttoned in the wrong place. "How do you know?" She trembled and glanced behind her. "The recording is not recorded in the system." I held up my work ID. "I need to check it now." The tape clicked in the old tape recorder. There was an even breathing sound in the background, and suddenly there was a whisper, like 2 people talking in each other's ears. "You can't leave." It was Lena's voice, but the ending was prolonged, with a stickiness that didn't belong to her. "We haven't finished the show yet." Dr. Lin scratched the corner of the table with her fingers. The surveillance showed that she was in the room that day, but the tone of her voice, she swallowed. It sounded like she was discussing something with someone. Song In called at 2 in the morning. When I picked up the phone, his breathing was as heavy as a bellows. "Mrs. Pullover, come to the theater. A piece of the wall of the underground simulated safe house has fallen off." Song In turned on the flashlight and swept the beam across the new scratch. Walla's back, which was carved deeper than before, with sawdust mixed with blood stuck in the scratch. "She came to ask last week." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She said she saw a woman in a black dress wandering around backstage, and asked if I had any impression of her. I traced the blood with my fingertips." "You didn't tell Jack?" "I thought." He suddenly lowered his voice. 3 days before she was arrested, a woman came to see her, wear a black dress, pearl earrings, and say, "It's curtain call." The computer screens in the technical department glowed with a cold light. I stared at the recovered social data. The Walla account updated its comment after Lena was arrested. "The drama is not over yet." The IP address was located in the city center, Isabel Chen's psychological counseling clinic. Jack banged his coffee cup against the table. He stared at the information I printed out, his scar jumping up and down as he bit his back teeth. "The superior wants to close the case, saying that profiles can't be used as evidence." But the note wasn't written by Lena. I pushed the scratched photo of the theater over, the conversation in the recording, the woman in the black dress, and this I...
He suddenly grabbed his coat. The car keys are on my desk.
You agree?
The scene won't lie. He loosened his tie, and his scar glowed pink under the light. But this time, the scene is saying that someone is hiding deeper than us. It was 4 a.m. outside the police station, and the rain was still falling. I held the clinic's business card in my hand, and the raindrops blurred the words Isabel Chen. The sound of an ambulance siren was heard in the distance, like someone humming an off-tune tune in the dark. Jack's car stopped at the side of the road, its headlights piercing the rain. He stuck his head out. The second button of his police uniform was unbuttoned, revealing the end of his scar. "Shall we go?" I touched the note in my pocket and turned to sit in the passenger seat. The wipers swung left and right, blurring the watermarks on the glass. In the rearview mirror, the neon lights of the police station turned into a red mist in the rain, just like the spotlights before the curtain of a theater was drawn. The clinic's house number lit up on the mobile phone map, glowing green, like an open eye. At 4:30 in the morning, raindrops dripped down the ribs of the umbrella into my collar, and I shivered. Jack's shoes made a wet clacking sound on the clinic steps, and just as he pressed the brass doorbell, the door opened. Isabel Chen stood inside the door. She was wearing an off-white silk shirt that was ironed without a wrinkle, and her pearl earrings glowed coldly under the corridor lights. She glanced at our badges and smiled like a carefully mixed cocktail. "Officers so early, Vara," Jack said directly. Her fingers paused on the doorknob for half a second. I stared at her pupils. They had shrunk to the size of a pinpoint. "That's one of my patients." As she turned, her hair brushed her shoulders. "But she hasn't been here for a long time." The clinic was filled with the aroma of bitter orange. I listened to the ticking of the old-fashioned clock on the wall, which was 3 times faster than my heartbeat. Jack's scar was faintly visible under the collar of his police uniform. He pulled his tie and said, "Last Wednesday at 10 o'clock. This IP logged into the social account of Voila." He took a screenshot of the location on the coffee table. Isabel dug her nails into the armrest of the sofa. "The consultation room is monitored, but it involves patient privacy." Bite. The glass door was blown open by the wind. Marina Soka stood in the rain, her bangs stuck to her forehead, her cell phone tightly clenched in her hand. Her lips trembled like dead leaves. "I've been here too." We all turned away. She raised her phone, and a photo in the album stung my eyes. She was sitting on this sofa, and the woman next to her was wearing sunglasses, and the hem of her black skirt was stained with gold dust from the theater. I don't remember when it was filmed. Marina poked her finger at the screen. But last Wednesday, I dreamed that this woman said, "It's time to end." Isabel's teacup hit the tray. "Miss Soka, you need to record it," I interrupted her. "Now." Her jawline tightened. 5 minutes later, a stack of anonymous files was placed in front of me. I flipped through them quickly, and starting from the 3rd copy, I saw repeated keywords: split personality tendencies, self-identity disorder, and strong dependence on the audience. "You are helping them construct another identity in the name of treatment," I said, looking up. She smiled, her pearl earrings swaying with a cold glow. "I just let them find themselves." Jack came over to investigate, and Scar rubbed my shoulder. "What does this have to do with Lena?" I pulled out an old medical record. Sumi Tennant was diagnosed with multiple personality disorder 10 years ago, and her treating physician was Isabel Chen. The last page reads, "Treatment failed, patient missing. Voila, is Sumi." I pulled up the surveillance footage in the clinic corridor and zoomed in on the image behind the sunglasses woman's ear. There was a cinnabar mole, and the position was exactly the same as in Sumi's old photo. She didn't disappear, she became Lena's shadow. Isabel's breathing suddenly became rapid. At this moment, Marina's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and her face turned pale. "Miss Serpilova, Your phone. I took out my cell phone. It was an anonymous email. When the video was loading, the screen glowed with a faint blue light. In the picture, a woman in a black skirt stands on the top floor of the theater, and the wind lifts her skirt. She turned her back to the camera and said in a cold voice, "You are almost there, but are you ready to face her?" The last frame suddenly jumps. Lena's face filled the entire screen, her mouth stretched to her ears, and the teardrop mole at the end of her eye was oozing red, the same paint used to paint the bloody words in the theater's secret room. The phone fell to the carpet with a thud. Jack picked up the phone with his knuckles white. Why is she in the theater? Because the play isn't over yet. I stared at Isabel, her pearl earrings swaying with her heartbeat, the same frequency as Sumi's medical records 10 years ago. Go backstage at the theater. Jack had already stood up, the second button of his police uniform still open, his scar glowing dark red in the morning light. Go now. Now. I took a note from my pocket. In Marina's photo, the woman in the black dress had a faded red rope wrapped around her wrist. It's woven exactly like the one in Lena's convenience store drawer. The rain has stopped. The sycamore leaves outside the clinic were dripping with water, which hit the car window like someone typing in Morse code. Jack turned the key, and the sound of the engine cut through the morning mist. In the rearview mirror, Isabel stood at the door. In the shadows, her mouth clearly said, "Curtain." It's time to turn on the spotlight backstage at the theater. The rust from the theater's iron door rubbed my hand. When Jack banged his shoulder against the door, I heard the muscles beneath his scar tense. Songen said, "There's a secret passage backstage that leads to the top floor." He wiped the rain off his face and put the intercom to his ear. Group 1, guard the side door. Group 2, go to the elevator. The musty smell mixed with the smell of paint came out from the backstage. The spotlights were not on. Only a few emergency lights were flickering overhead, stretching the shadows on the screen very long. I walked around the prop box in the dark, and suddenly heard the sound of fabric rubbing. A woman in a black dress was standing at the corner, sunglasses hanging on her chest, and the cinnabar mole behind her ear looked like a drop of solidified blood. Sumi Tennant. I held the body camera on my waist. She didn't move, and even curled up the corners of her mouth. "Miss Pullover, I have been waiting for you for a long time." Jack's flashlight shone on her face. She raised her arm and let the sleeves slide down, revealing a dark red scar on her wrist that looked like a twisted earthworm. The shape of the scar was exactly the same as the one she had left when she cut herself with a utility knife in the Lena convenience store. Surveillance video. "I'm not the murderer," she said softly. "I'm just another side of her." A colleague's voice came from the intercom. When Jack handcuffed her, she suddenly leaned close to me and said, "Guess what she hid in the diary? A confession or a new script?" The lights in the police station's interrogation room were so bright that it was hard to open your eyes. Isabel's pearl earrings were still shaking, and the frequency was exactly the same as the anxiety palpitations recorded in Sumi's medical records 10 years ago. I just guide patients to release stress through role-playing. She tapped her fingertips on the table. Building a substitute is a common treatment method, so you let Sumi act as Lena's perfect shadow, and let Lena kill people using Sumi's identity. I put the screenshot of Lena's convenience store surveillance in front of her. In the picture, the woman in sunglasses, Sumi, was stuffing bloody gloves into the shelf, while the real Lena was scanning the code at the checkout counter, like an outsider. She dug her nails into her palms. "I didn't instigate, but you let their boundaries collapse," I interrupted her. When Lena began to imitate Sumi's scars and when Sumi did the dirty work for her, you didn't see danger, but a successful treatment case. She suddenly laughed. "You should ask Lena who came up with the idea first." When the iron door of the detention room opened, Lena was curled up in the corner. When she heard the word Sumi was arrested, she dug her nails deep into the bed like a cat whose tail was stepped on. "I want to see Jane. Now." There was a locked diary under her pillow, and the keyhole showed signs of being pried open. She must have pried it open with her fingernails. There was a yellowed photo on the first page, two little girls in floral dresses, holding hands, standing at the door of an orphanage, with a sign behind them that read, "Chiang Mai Sunshine Home." "She is my sister." Lena's tears dripped onto the photo, blurring out the word sister. We lost contact after being adopted by different families. When we met again at the psychiatric clinic 7 years ago, she didn't remember me anymore. The diary contained Sumi's medical records and Lena's notes written in red pen. Wara, Sumi's secondary personality, likes black, so I threw away all the colorful skirts. Wala was afraid of pain, so I cut myself with a knife to make her think that I was the one in pain. What happened next? I turned to the last page, on which was a policy change notice. The beneficiary column read "Distant Nephew." The handwriting was exactly the same as the scapegoat plan in Sumi's diary. Later, Lena suddenly laughed, but couldn't stop crying. We couldn't tell who was Vala and who was Lena. At 3 o'clock in the morning, in the Serious Crime Squad office, documents were piled up like a mountain. I pinned all the evidence on the whiteboard in timeline and finally put a note on it. Psychological intervention requires an ethical review mechanism. Jack pushed the door open, holding 2 cups of cold coffee in his hands. The director said to include your suggestions in the annual report. His scar glowed light pink under the desk lamp. 10 years ago, when my apprentice died in the line of duty, I thought solving the case meant catching the murderer. Now I understand. He paused. Some evil grows out of cracks that we don't see. I looked up at him. This old detective who always said, "The scene won't lie," had a softness in his eyes that I had never seen before. "You did it." He pushed the coffee to me. "Not only did you solve the case, you also let more light shine through the cracks." In the visiting area of the mental hospital, glass separates Lena and Sumi. Sama put her hand against the glass and Lena did the same. I heard Sumi's lips say, "It's time to bow out." Lena nodded heavily. Her tears hit the glass, leaving 2 blurry watermarks. On the way back, Jack parked his car in front of the theater. The neon lights lit up for the last time, and the words Siam Theater flickered in the rain and fog. 2 figures walked out from the backstage, one to the left and one to the right, but their shadows overlapped under the street light. "Are they really separated?" I asked softly. Jack said nothing, but turned up the speed on his windshield wipers. When I was sorting out the recordings of Lena's interrogation late at night, I discovered that the last section had been artificially cut off with some noise. Listening closely, I heard 2 overlapping female voices, as if reciting a line. "Who's next scene?" The screen of the recorder suddenly went black. I looked at the dancing snowflakes on the screen and felt a chill on the back of my neck. Some stories may never really end. It was just after 2 in the morning when I pulled Lena's interrogation materials from the hard drive. The last audio file in the folder has no date and the file name is garbled. My hand paused as I was about to click the play button. I had already checked the interrogation records in the system 7 times, and this was an extra one. The sound of electricity crackled for 2 seconds. She promised me to wait for me to come out. Lena's voice was very soft, as if she was talking in her sleep. In the background there was the creaking of the iron door of the detention room, and the hum of the surveillance camera. I pressed the pause button and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. This recording was not uploaded to the evidence system. Who recorded it? Who promised you? The sudden male voice startled me so much that I let go of the recorder, and it fell on the table. Jack bent down to pick it up, and Lena's face was still moving on the screen. He stared at the time code. This was late at night 3 days ago. The officer on duty said she had been sleeping that night. I replayed it. Lena's lip shape and voice didn't match, as if she was talking to the air. She promised me, wait for me to come out. Who is she talking to? Jack pushed the recorder towards him, and Scar's brows jumped as he frowned. I remembered the dark shadow that flashed across the surveillance camera in the interrogation room. During the interrogation last week, there was a woman in a black dress outside the glass window. I thought it was a reflection at the time, but now I see. Sammy, I blurted out. Jack's phone vibrated at this moment. He glanced at the screen, and when he looked up, his brows knitted together. Theater manager Song An is downstairs, and he said he has something urgent to talk to you about. The voice-activated lights in the police station lobby flickered. Song An clutched a hardcover journal, his knuckles turning white. I was sorting out the warehouse tonight, and found this theater performance record from 1998. He turned to the folded page. The ink was already smudged. There was a mental breakdown backstage that day. I took a closer look. The name column read, "Sue me, Tenant," and the note column was handwritten by the doctor. The patient claims I am not myself. I am someone else. Another person? Jack poked his head in. Voila. I remembered the name in Lena's diary, Sumi's secondary personality. Songen's Adam's apple moved. That day she grabbed the mirror and shouted, "Don't come over," saying that the person in the mirror was not her. He suddenly grabbed my wrist. "Miss Pullover, do you think? Is there someone behind the mirror?" My phone vibrated in my pocket. I was about to send Song out when Marina's name popped up. "I'll wait for you in the cafe." Her voice was softer than the last time they met. I may have remembered something wrong about Lena and Sumi. Marina's fingernails were stained with glitter from her stage makeup, and in front of her was an untouched glass of iced Americano. She fished out a photo from her bag, the corners of which were curled up. I was sorting out old photo albums last week, and found this one. The photo is blurry, as if it was soaked in water. Two women in black dresses sat in the corner, their long hair hanging down and their faces almost touching. But look closely. Their fingers are folded on their knees, but there is no touching. That day was our graduation party. Marina twisted her napkin with her fingers. I thought they were chatting, but later I asked the waiter, and he said they sat there for 2 hours without saying a word. I scanned the photos into the flatbed. After zooming in, the woman on the left has a red mole behind her ear. Lena does have a cinnabar mole behind her ear. The necklace pendant on the woman on the right gleams, matching the silver moon pendant on the list of common items in Sumi's medical record. They are in the same space at the same time. But they are not communicating, I whispered. It's like they are playing each other's mirror image. It was already dawn when Jack's car stopped downstairs of the police station. They rushed into the office with a stack of psychological files, and in the sound of the printer spitting out paper, I found the key. Lena's 2018 treatment records show that her attending physician at Isabel Clinic was also Sumi's psychiatrist. The crossover treatment period overlapped for 3 months. It's not a coincidence. I slapped the two medical records in front of Jack. The doctor asked them to participate in each other's treatment, calling it empathy training. Jack turned to Lena's treatment log, and the last page read, "The patient began to imitate the behavior patterns of the secondary personality, saying this will make her happy. So Lena cut her own arm to bear the pain for Sumi?" He looked up, and the scar darkened in the morning light. I nodded. The boundaries between their personalities have long been blurred. Lena thought she was playing Wala, and Sumi thought she was playing Lena. The glass of the detention room was fogged up. Lena sat in a plastic chair, the scars on her wrists pink. I knocked on the glass, and she slowly raised her head, her pupils shrinking to the size of needles. "The place that the mirror can't reach is our real home." She suddenly smiled. "Do you know why?" I didn't say anything. Her eyes drifted to the window, where there was only the shadow of an old banyan tree. "Because the us in the mirror are for others to see." Her voice was as light as a sigh. "The real us is behind the mirror." When I stood up to leave, she suddenly rushed towards the glass, leaving a blurry mark with her palm. "Did you hear that? She's looking for her." On the way back, Jack parked his car in front of Isabel's clinic. Raindrops floated on the windshield, and the neon sign of the clinic read, "Psychological treatment" flickered. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I looked at the windows on the second floor of the clinic, where the dark grey curtains were drawn. A shadow flashed, and quickly disappeared. "It's time to ask the doctor from that year." As Jack started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a woman in a black dress standing in front of the clinic. She tilted her head back, as if looking at us. The moment the windshield wipers swept past her, she disappeared. As I pushed open the glass door of the clinic, the doorbell rang shrilly. The girl at the front desk was fiddling with her cell phone with her head down. When she heard the noise, she looked up suddenly and the silver ring on her earlobe shook. She was the same receptionist in the follow-up registration photo in Lena's medical record. "Is it an appointment?" Her fingertips tapped quickly on the keyboard, but her eyes glanced towards the second floor. Jack slapped his ID on the marble countertop. "Check the visitor log." Her hand trembled, and the registration book flipped to the latest page with a click. I leaned closer, and the 4 words "Anuka Songpong" in the name that was not yet dry made my pupils shrink. This was Sumi's father, who died in a car accident 3 months ago. "He came last Wednesday," the receptionist said in a trembling voice, "and said he wanted to see Dr. Isabel. Can a dead person come to register?" Jack tapped the registration book with his knuckles, and his scar tightened along his jawline. The little sister bit her lip and said nothing. Footsteps were heard on the second floor, and Dr. Lin walked down the stairs holding the handrail, with half a box of anti-anxiety drugs revealed in the pocket of his white coat. She glanced at us, then at the front desk, and suddenly pulled out a USB flash drive from her bag. "I found this when I was sorting out old materials yesterday." There is a recording in the USB flash drive, amid the noise of electricity. Isabel's voice was as sweet as honey. "Close your eyes and imagine that you are another person, a stronger you who has never been hurt." "But I can't do it." The answer came from a young girl's voice with a crying tone. "You can do it." Isabel's tone was like coaxing a child. "Look, Sumi can do it." She told me that when she became Lena, even the pain was not so unbearable. Lena also said that when she became Vala, she didn't even shed tears. I gripped the USB drive so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Jack leaned in, his breath brushing the back of my neck. "Who's Vala?" Just then the phone vibrated. Songchai's name popped up. I turned on the speakerphone and heard his voice like thunder. "Milo Palova, the Bureau is closing the case. The serial murder case has been attributed to a distant nephew. The case file must be handed over within 3 days. The chain of evidence has not been closed yet." Jack roared. "The higher-ups' patience has run out." Songchai hung up the phone. The air conditioning in the clinic suddenly stopped, and stuffy air rushed in with the smell of disinfectant. I opened my tablet and pulled up Lena's social feed. She always posted photos of the theater, late at night, with the caption, "The light behind the curtain." Scrolling down, Sumi's account also has similar content, and the timeline completely overlaps. "Palova," Dr. Lin suddenly pulled my sleeve. "There's a girl waiting for you at the door." She stood outside the glass door, raindrops sticking to the ends of her hair. Seeing me come out, she raised her phone. "I am a former patient of Isabel. She said I could be anyone, so I registered 7 social accounts, each with a different life. There were 7 avatars on the screen, including a teacher, a nurse, and a bartender. Until last week I saw myself in a convenience store. The me in one of the accounts was buying cigarettes. Her fingers were shaking. "Doctor, now I can't tell which one is the real me. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I feel like the person in the mirror is smiling at me and saying, 'It's time to change roles.'" The curtains on the second floor windows moved. Isabel stood in the shadows, her golden hair neatly tied up like a perfect sculpture. "Want to talk?" She pushed open the glass door, and the scent of perfume came out with the cold air. "About Lena, about Sumi, and about what you think is the truth." We followed her up to the second floor. There is an abstract painting hanging on the wall of the consulting room, which shows two overlapping human figures in mirror symmetry. Isabel sat in the leather swivel chair and tapped the table with her fingertips. Do you think they are puppets being manipulated? Corina told me that becoming Walla made her no longer afraid. Sumi said that becoming Lena gave her a reason to live. What about a Nutra Sampong? I slapped the registration book in front of her. A dead person coming for a follow-up visit is what you call a way of survival. She smiled, and the fine lines at the corners of her eyes were like cracked spider webs. Miss Pullover, do you really think those family members are here to seek justice? They are just too lonely. Rather than accepting the death of their loved ones, they prefer to believe that their loved ones are alive in another way. Jack clenched his fists. So you teach them to act? I just gave them a choice. Isabel stood up and walked around the desk to me. Just like Lena chose to become Walla, Sumi chose to become Lena. Their disappearance and death are just a change of stage. She opened the door of the clinic, and rain and fog poured in. Before closing the door, she glanced at me sideways, and the curve of her lips was exactly the same as Lena's smile in the detention room. For some scripts, the ending should be decided by the audience. The door locked with a click. Jack took out his cell phone and dialed Song Yim's number. Old Song, check if there is anything unusual happening at the Siam Theater recently. I looked at the mirror at the corner of the stairs, and my forehead was covered with sweat. Suddenly the mirror was covered with a layer of white mist, and a line of words was vaguely reflected in the blurred watermarks. Waiting for you behind the curtain. Jack's phone vibrated hot in his palm. Song Yin's voice came out of the receiver with an echo. There are fresh shoe prints on the backstage steps of the theater. The rubber soles matched the pattern of Lena's safe house. I pulled up the collar of my coat. The rain in Bangkok hasn't stopped yet, and it's like a layer of fog on my eyelashes, making everything look blurry. When Jack parked the car at the side door of the Siam Theater, Songgan was squatting at the bottom of the steps, with the beam of his flashlight nailed into the cracks in the cement, two wet shoe prints, deep at the forefoot and shallow at the heel, as if someone had rushed in a panic but never left. Where's the surveillance? Jack squatted down and rubbed his fingertips along the edge of the shoe prints. The water was still flowing down, mixed with mud. It's broken. Songin rubbed the back of his neck. They checked it yesterday afternoon and said the line was aging. When he looked up, raindrops dripped down the brim of his hat into his collar, but the cleaning lady came to clean this morning and said the back door was locked. She opened it with a key. I walked up the stairs. The crystal chandelier on the dome of the hall was covered with dust, making the empty seats look like rows of empty coffins. The stage curtain was half drawn, revealing the mottled red velvet behind it. Jack's leather heels hit the floor, making a tapping sound and bouncing off the wall, startling a few sparrows and fluttering against the glass. Over there, I pointed to the lighting console on the left. The iron shelf was covered with dust, except for a fresh scratch on the edge of the console, as if it was caused by a fingernail. Jack handed over the rubber gloves. I squatted down and ran my fingertips along the scratches, and the metal layer popped open with a click. Inside lay a letter, its edges wrinkled and stained with coffee. The signature is Walla, and the handwriting is crooked, like a child's. I will wait for you there, if you are willing to watch the last show. Address: 3 Old Church Lane, Thornbury District. A trap. Jack held the letter up to his eyes. In Lena's handwriting. No. I touched the back of the letter. Lena writes in cursive. Each word in this letter is separate. It seems like she is deliberately imitating her. Pull over. Marlowe. Inspector Songchai's voice exploded from the door. His suit trousers were stained with mud, and he was holding a folder in his hand. The bureau just issued a notice that Lena's case is closed. He glanced at the letter in my hand, his brows knitted into a knot. Come back with me now to write the case closure report. Jack stuffed the letter into the evidence bag. We haven't checked the shoe prints yet. No need to investigate. Songchai's Adam's apple moved. The forensic doctor confirmed that Sumi's cause of death was an overdose of sleeping pills. It had nothing to do with Lena. When he turned around, his briefcase hit the steps. "If you continue to investigate," his voice suddenly lowered, "it will not be good for anyone." After the sound of his leather shoes disappeared outside the door, Annan flashed out from behind the pillar. There was a lollipop in the pocket of his white coat, and the wrapper was wrinkled. "The letter just now." He handed me a note. The fingerprint comparison result.
I unfolded the paper.
The name's handwriting was crooked. It doesn't belong to Lena Sumi, or even anyone in the known database. The iron gate at 3 Old Church Lane was badly rusted. Jack kicked the door, and it creaked open. Half of the church spire collapsed. The cross lay crooked in the grass, and moss covered the remaining walls. There was a secret door behind the altar, and when I pushed it I was covered in dust. There is a small theater inside. The walls were covered with posters, surveillance screenshots of Lena scanning a code at a convenience store, Sumi's silhouette, with her head down in the hospital corridor, and one I had never seen before. A girl in a red dress standing at the door of the safe house, turning back and smiling at the camera. The curve of her mouth, exactly the same as Lena's in the detention room. There are 3 chairs in the center of the stage. The one on the left was covered with a beige sweater, and the cuffs were pilling. The armrest of the middle one was engraved with Sumi. The one on the right was empty, and the seat was covered with a thin layer of dust. But there was a fresh indentation, as if someone had just sat there. I walked onto the stage. Something hit the sole of my foot, so I squatted down to wipe it. There was a line of small words engraved in the cracks of the floor. "If there is no audience, does this place still exist?" Jack's breath hit the back of his neck. "Who carved it?"
I don't know.
I touched the words, sawdust digging into my fingertips. "But she's waiting." The wind suddenly blew in. The bronze bell on the church tower rang loudly, startling the sparrows and causing them to fly away in panic. When I looked up, the last light flickered twice and went out. In the darkness, Jack's hand suddenly grabbed my wrist. His palms were full of sweat. "Jane?" When the bell rang for the 3rd time, it stopped. Something was moving above my head. It sounded like fabric rubbing against each other, or like breathing. "Shh." I tugged at Jack's sleeve. In the darkness, a faint light suddenly lit up. It was a spotlight in the corner of the stage. Dust was floating in the beam, shining on an empty chair. The indentation on the seat was still there, as if someone had just stood up and the temperature had not yet dissipated. Songin's flashlight beam swept across the theater lobby. "Look at the edge of the steps." His Adam's apple moved, and the beam of light was fixed in the gap between the marble. This thing was not available when we patrolled at 3 in the morning. I squatted down. The rubber sole had a deep indentation on the forefoot, and a shallow indentation on the heel, exactly the same as the intruder's shoe prints at the base of the safe house wall. "Size?" Jack half knelt, his left hand habitually reaching for the holster on his waist. "Size 37. Songen's voice trembled. "Lena wears size 37. Sumi too." The shoe prints extended from the main entrance of the hall, and suddenly changed direction on the 3rd step. I looked in the direction it went, and saw a fire door at the end. There was dust on the crack of the door, but there was a fresh scratch in the middle. "Push it." I rubbed the edge of the door with my fingertips. In 2 hours, the door creaked open. The smell of mold and moisture surged out. The stairs went down, and the corner was as black as if it had been splashed with ink. The warehouse below is old. Songin clutched the keychain, and the sound of metal colliding was harsh. It was sealed 10 years ago. You can't get in without a key. Jack pulled out his tactical flashlight and shone it toward the stairs. The dust on the steps was left with a half print by the tip of a shoe, which matched the previous set perfectly. "Someone's gone down," he said, his voice as deep as stone. I didn't say anything. My Adam's apple tightened. There was no trace of the shoe prints in the safe house, as if as if someone deliberately let us see them come in, but hid their lead. Go to the lighting console. I turned around suddenly. Lena has performed in amateur dramas. In old theaters like this, the lighting console has a mezzanine. Song shook his flashlight. How do you know? She posted it on her social media account. I touched the rusty lock on the console. Last Christmas, she filmed a video of adjusting the spotlight. There was this row of copper buttons in the background. The lock popped open with a click. There was a letter lying in the interlayer. The edges of the letter paper were curled up, and the ink was smudged, as if it had been soaked by tears. To my dear audience, I read aloud, Jack's breath burning the back of my neck. I'll be waiting for you at 3 Old Church Lane if you'd like to see the last show. Vara. Jack frowned. Her real name is Lena Vera. Is Vala her stage name? No. I held the letter paper, which felt rough. Her convenience store ID card says Lena Vera, and her social media accounts never use Vala. Jack took out the intercom. I'm calling for backup. Don't. Songin suddenly grabbed his wrist, digging his nails into his scar. The signal here is poor, and his Adam's apple moved. She won't hurt you. How do you know? Jack pulled his hand back, his voice as cold as ice. Songin didn't answer. He stared at the words on the letter, his eyes red as if they were about to bleed. The alarm suddenly blew. Songkai's black sedan rolled over the gravel road near the theater, and the brakes sounded harshly. His trouser legs were stained with mud. His tie was askew at his collarbone, and when he saw us, his temples throbbed. Marlowe, pull over, come back to the station with me. The case is not closed. Jack stood in front of me. It's over. Songchai tugged at his tie. The medical examiner confirmed that Sumi committed suicide, and Lena's alibi is complete. He glanced at the letter in my hand. His pupils shrank. Right now, Inspector Songkai, I interrupted. The safe house compartment, the shoe prints at the theater, this letter. That's enough. He suddenly raised his voice, the veins on his neck bulging. Who do you think you are? Psychological profiler. Can profiling be used as evidence? As he turned around, the briefcase hit the railing, and a photo fell out with a clatter. I caught a glimpse. It was the girl in the red dress, standing at the door of the safe house. She turned back and smiled, and the curve of her mouth was exactly the same as Lena's in the detention room. Songchai bent down to pick up the photo, his movement so fast that it seemed as if he was snatching it. Let's go. He pulled my arm, his nails pinching it painfully. Don't make it difficult for me. Jack grabbed his wrist and said, let go. Songchai stared at Jack's scar for 3 seconds, then suddenly smiled. Okay, you guys check it out. He adjusted his tie, but if something goes wrong, he glanced at me. Don't beg me. After his footsteps disappeared outside the door, Anand flashed out from behind the curtain. In the pocket of his white coat was a strawberry-flavored lollipop, the wrapper of which was wrinkled. Fingerprint report. I unfolded the paper. Anand's handwriting was crooked. It doesn't belong to Lena, Sumi, or even anyone in the known database. Where's the handwriting? Jack asked. I compared Lena's convenience store receipts and social media accounts. Anand licked the lollipop. It wasn't written by her. Goosebumps formed on the back of my neck. The iron gate at 3 Old Church Lane was badly rusted. Jack kicked the door, and it creaked open. Half of the church spire collapsed, and the cross lay crooked in the haystack. There was a secret door behind the altar, and when I pushed it, I was covered in dust. There is a small theater inside. The walls were covered with photos. The surveillance screenshot of Lena scanning the code, Sumi's silhouette with her head down in the hospital, and another photo that Song had never seen before. A girl in a red dress, standing at the door of the safe house, turning back and smiling at the camera, exactly the same as the one Song had guessed. There are 3 chairs in the center of the stage. The one on the left is paired with a beige sweater with pilling cuffs. Sumi often wears this. The middle armrest has the word Sumi engraved on it, and the one on the right is empty. There is a thin layer of dust on the seat, but there is a fresh indentation, as if someone had just sat on it. I walked onto the stage. Something hit the sole of my foot, so I squatted down to wipe it. There was a line of small words engraved in the cracks of the floor. If there is no audience, does this play still exist? Jack's breath hit the back of his neck. Who carved it? I don't know. I touched the words, sawdust digging into my fingertips. But she's waiting. The wind suddenly blew in. The bronze bell on the church tower rang loudly, startling the sparrows and causing them to fly away in panic. When I looked up, the last light flickered twice and went out. In the darkness, Jack's hand suddenly grabbed my wrist. His palms were full of sweat. Jane? When the bell rang for the third time, it stopped. Something was moving above my head. It sounded like fabric rubbing against each other, or like breathing. Shh! I tugged at Jack's sleeve. In the darkness, a faint light suddenly lit up. It was a spotlight in the corner of the stage. Dust was floating in the beam, shining on an empty chair. The indentation on the seat was still there, as if someone had just stood up and the temperature had not yet dissipated. Then I heard it. The sound was wrapped in dust, as if it was floating from far away, yet also as if it was right next to my ear. Welcome back, dear audience. The beam of light in the darkness made me squint. In the beam of the spotlight, the floating dust swirled like gold powder. The indentation on the empty chair suddenly moved. First, the hem of a black skirt swept across the seat. Then a bony hand rested on the armrest, and finally a face I had seen in a photograph. Her smile was sweet when she was wearing a red dress, but now she was wearing a black dress, and the corners of her eyes were cold. You are finally here. Jack's holster clicked open. I could feel his fingertips shaking. When his apprentice died in the line of duty 10 years ago, his hand holding the gun was probably like this. He was holding too hard and his hand was unstable. I'm not here to escape. The woman in the black dress raised her chin. I'm here to take my final bow. The iron door of the church clanged loudly in the wind. Dr. Lim's voice rushed in from the doorway. Jane. The hem of her white coat was stained with grass debris, and her face was paler than the plaster statue under the cross. Isabel is missing. She staggered over, the medical records in her hand rustling. I just came out of the clinic. The drawer of her office was open, and Sumi's treatment records were on the table. I took the medical records. The first page was Sumi's registration photo. Not the girl who was looking down and scanning the QR code in the convenience store surveillance video, but the person in a red dress standing at the door of the safe house on the photo wall. Her real name is Valacharan. Dr. Lin dug his nails into the back of my hand. She was admitted to the hospital 3 years ago for post-traumatic stress disorder. The attending physician was Isabel. Jack came over to look, the gun still in his hand. So that Lena from the convenience store, it's Vala's imitator. I turned to the last page of the medical record. Isabel's handwriting was crooked, as if someone had held the pen to write it. She wrote in her diary, I finally found someone who can live for me. The woman in the black dress laughed. Her laughter sounded like a rusty bell. You are smarter than Isabel. You are not Lena's shadow. I slapped the medical record on the stage. Lena is the puppet of the convenience store, and you are the manipulator behind the curtain. She tilted her head and looked at me. Where's the evidence? The compartment of the safe house. I counted the clues. Lena was able to find the mechanism in the wall because you took her to the secret door of the theater. Song-in said that the structure of the old theater and the safe house in the colonial period were designed by the same designer. The beneficiary of the insurance policy has changed. Jack continued. Lena doesn't even know any distant nephew. You taught her to make it up, just like teaching her to post a short essay about lack of love on social media. The woman in the black dress stroked the word Sumi, engraved on the back of the chair with her fingers. So what? She loved so hard, so stupidly. She suddenly looked up, her eyes burning with the light that I had seen in Lena's mobile phone album. Those photos of the victims taken secretly all had this almost paranoid light. "She is the self you are avoiding," I blurt out. Her pupils shrank. Song-in stood at the backstage door at some point, holding a yellowed message book in his hand. 10 years ago, there was a rehearsal accident. His voice trembled. The actress playing Medea suddenly slashed her face with a knife, shouting, "Vara will kill me," while slashing. He opened the message book, and the handwriting on the last page was the same as the small words in the cracks in the floor. "If there is no audience, will this play still exist?" After that day, this name started to appear in all the prop boxes. Song-in wiped his face. I thought it was a prank, until Lena came to the theater for the first time. She stood in the center of the stage and said, "Vara asked me to come." The woman in the black dress pressed her fingertips against her forehead, as if she was trying to press on some kind of pain. "Lena said she wanted to be the protagonist," she whispered. "She said as long as I teach her, she is willing to do anything, kill for me, disappear for me, be chased by the police for me." "So you let her hide in the mezzanine of the safe house?" Jack lowered his gun. "Let Tony take the black money as a scapegoat, and let the insurance policy mislead us to find the non-existent nephew." But she missed one thing. I took out the fingerprint report that Annam gave me. The bloody words "scapegoat" on the wall of the safe house. "The fingerprint does not belong to Lena. It's yours." She didn't deny it. The wind lifted the corner of her skirt, revealing the silver chain on her ankle, which was exactly the same as the love token given by her boyfriend that Lena posted on her social account. "What do you want?" Jack asked. She looked at the hole above the stage, and the rain leaked in and stained her eyelashes. "I want this play to have an ending." She turned back to look at me. "And you are the one who can write the ending." I fished out an old script from my pocket. The words "Final Review" on the cover were wrinkled by the rain. The tip of the pen hovered over the paper and paused for 3 seconds. I crossed out "Final Review" and wrote "Rebirth."
The rain is getting heavier.
Dr. Lin said he would send Song-in back, and Jack went to chase the sparrow that suddenly ran away. He always said the scene won't lie, but at this moment even he didn't notice when the woman in the black dress disappeared. One of the lights in the archive room is broken. As I was putting the case materials on the shelf, I heard the sound of papers shuffling behind me. "Welcome back, dear audience." The sound was very light, as if it was seeping out from the cracks in the file box. I turned around. There was only a row of dark brown filing cabinets, casting long shadows in the dim light. As I was stuffing the case materials into the third shelf, the back of my right hand scraped against the metal edge. The blood beads oozing from the fingertips spread out on the brown paper cover like a tiny flower. The rain was still tapping on the window, and the watermarks on the glass were crooked, as if someone had scratched them with a finger, just like the force with which Vala had carved Scapegoat on the wood with his bloody fingertips in the safe house compartment last night. When a person no longer needs to pretend to be someone else, he can truly become himself. I closed the notebook, and the tip of my pen made an indentation on the last line. The ink was not dry yet, and the wind caused by the breath blew the paper pages, making a crackling sound. "Simple." Dr. Lin's voice came from behind me, and I knocked over the coffee cup on the table when I turned around. The dark brown liquid spread across the case report, covering the photo of Lena Vera. Her smile in the convenience store surveillance video was blurred, like a ball of melted wax. "Do you still believe that there is only one version of the truth?" She handed me a tissue, her fingertips stained with the smell of hospital disinfectant. I stared at the medical record folder sticking out of her white coat pocket. It was exactly the same one that the forensic doctor had when Jack's apprentice died in the line of duty 10 years ago. "Inspector Sonke asked me to inform you that the closing meeting will be held in 10 minutes. Dr. Lin pressed a tissue to the wound on the back of my hand. He said the public needs clear answers. The blinds in the conference room were not drawn tightly, and drops of rain hit the scar on the back of Jack's neck at an angle. The scar was left when he was a patrolman and saved a kidnapped child. It was now bluish-white and looked like a dead snake. Thank you both for your efforts. Songshai's voice sounded like he was reading a speech. It has been verified that Lena Vera is the real murderer of the serial murder case. She used the partition of the safe house to fake her disappearance and attempted to frame a fictitious person. The case is officially closed.
I took out my notebook and wanted to record the profile revision part.
Jack suddenly pushed a manila envelope in front of me, his knuckles pressed against the table, with half a piece of notepaper visible between his fingers, the same color as the ink on the bloody words of the safe house. An anonymous letter, stuffed in my drawer. He spoke in a low voice, as if afraid of being heard by the surveillance camera. The postmark is this morning, near the Siam Theater. The words on the back of the notepaper burned in my palm. Thank you for letting me be the protagonist. The handwriting was round, with a slight pause at the beginning of the stroke, exactly the same as Vala's habit when he wrote in the guest book. If there is no audience, will this play still exist? Did she really disappear? Or... I clipped the note into my notebook and looked up to meet Jack's eyes. The scar on his left hand was twitching, as if to say that he wanted to ask the same question. The phone vibrated in my pocket. Marina's name popped up, with a voice message. I'm going to do a one-man show, written for Lena. Are you coming? The door of the theater was ajar. Marina stood backstage. The script cover in her hand smelled musty like an old book. The scapegoat, she handed me the script, her hair stained with raindrops. She said this is a farewell to all the audiences. Jack's car was parked outside the theater. He took out his cigarette case and put it down again, then looked at his watch. I'll go in with you. When the spotlight came on, Marlena stood center stage. She was wearing a washed-out blue cloth skirt, exactly the same as the one she wore in the photo of Lena dating her boyfriend on social media. There were no lines or music. She just slowly raised her hand and drew a knife scar in the air, just like the bloody words on the wall of the safe house. When the curtain fell, the whole place was silent. I heard a child in the back row ask his mother, "Why isn't the auntie talking?" The mother hushed and said, "She is acting herself." Marina bowed in the light. Her shadow was stretched out and cast on the gap in the stage floor, where Lena had carved "Vara will kill me." Now those words were covered with fresh red paint, like a diary that had been gently closed. "This is what she wanted," I whispered. Jack said nothing, just put his coat around my shoulders. The rain stopped, and the wind smelled of grass, mixed with the scent of jasmine from the flower stall outside the theater. "It's time to go," he said. As we approached the theater entrance, a crack appeared in the clouds to the east. The first rays of morning light filtered down and shone on the script that Marina handed over. There was a line of small words on the second cover, which was lightly crossed out and rewritten in pencil. Dedicated to all those who have waited behind the curtain. When I returned to the police station, Dr. Lin was waiting at the door of the archives room. She was holding a yellowed brown paper bag in her arms, with a red stamp of Youth Psychological Intervention file on the seal, founded in the old warehouse. She handed me the file. "It may be related to the case you are investigating." I opened the cover. The ink on the name column is a little blurry, but the first two words can be clearly seen. Voila! End of this chapter. The fluorescent lights in the archives room hummed overhead. Dr. Lin stuffed a brown paper bag into my arms, her fingernails touching the seal, and said, "The metal cabinet at the back of the old warehouse contains records of the 2000. A half-pack of anti-anxiety drugs appeared in the pocket of her white coat, and she continued, "When she was 14, Lena Vera received personality dissociation treatment under the name Vara." My hand that was pulling out the file paused for a moment. The ink in the name column smudged, as if it had been soaked with tears, but the penmanship in the remarks column was dazzlingly clear. Now Vala, primary dissociative identity. Sexual assault, Dr. Lin suddenly said, his voice colder than the air conditioning. Her father did it to her, and it lasted for 3 years. Her mother said family disgrace should not be made public, so she split herself into two people. Wale endured the pain for her, resented for her, and remembered everything for her. The brown paper made a crisp sound. I turned to the page of the psychological assessment report. The words traumatic amnesia, written in pencil, were circled again and again in red pen. There was also an interview record attached to the back. Who is Vala? She is my shadow. I hide in her body to see the world. The phone vibrated in my palm. It was Marina's number, and the call was filled with the noise of electricity. I dug out my old phone last night. She breathed quickly. Lena sent me a message the night before she disappeared, saying, "Do you remember the Hamlet we performed in the old auditorium?" "I'm the damned one." "The old auditorium?" I asked, holding the file tightly. "Have you ever performed this play?" "She performed in the drama club when she was a sophomore in high school." Marina paused for 2 seconds, as if biting her lip. "She was supposed to play Ophelia, but she always forgot her lines. One day she was the only one left backstage, and I heard her reciting Claudius's monologue in a male voice. My sins float in the air too heavy to hold down heaven." She suddenly laughed. At the time I thought she was rehearsing her lines, but now that I think about it, that voice doesn't sound like her at all. After hanging up the phone, Jack appeared at the door of the archives room. He held a USB drive tightly in his hand, and the scar on his chin was stretched like a line. We checked the surveillance footage of Lena High School. He inserted the USB drive into my computer. The technical department recovered a deleted video. The black and white picture jumped out. Backstage at the old auditorium, a girl in a blue and white school uniform turned her back to the camera, holding a crumpled script in her hands. She turned around suddenly, and the camera shook. That was not Lena's face. "Vara," I whispered. Jack nodded. The timestamp shows March 15th, 2009, 3 months before her first visit to the psychiatrist. He tapped the screen, so it didn't appear later. She just hid it too well. There was the sound of leather boots in the corridor. Inspector Songchai stood at the door holding a folder, the gold chain on his collar flashing. "Milo, pull over." He raised his chin towards me. "Hand over all the information about Vala." "Why?" Jack stood in front of my computer. Some guy tugged at his tie. "The higher-ups said the public doesn't need to know that the serial killer has mental problems." His eyes swept across the files spread out on my desk. "They just need a name. Lena Vera." I pretended to sort through the papers and clicked my thumb on the side of my phone 3 times. The cloud backup notification sound is as soft as a sigh. The rain started to fall late at night. Jack's car was parked outside the Siam Theater, and the windshield wipers scraped off a piece of blurry glass. Marina said there might be something in the floor mezzanine. He took out a tactical flashlight. "Did you notice the crack behind the curtain when you watched the show last time?" The theater door was not locked. We walked towards the stage with flashlights. Rain dripped from the eaves onto the floor, splashing a smell of stale sawdust. There was a loose wooden board under the lighting console. Jack pried it with the tip of his pen, and a musty smell mixed with the crisp sound of paper came out. The cover of the diary was polished to a shine, and on the title page was written in lipstick, "Who am I? I don't know. I just hope someone will come to see me." The last page was dated 3 days before the crime, and the handwriting was crooked. Like a child's. Wara said she would help me get rid of it. She would let everyone see clearly that I was the protagonist. She didn't want to disappear. I closed the diary, and the rain hit the window glass. She just wanted to be noticed. Jack's flashlight suddenly turned toward the side door. There hung a bunch of brass keys, the last of which had a cross carved on it, and a keyhole under the church altar. "Let's go." He suddenly grabbed my arm. "Let's go back to the police station first." I stared at the keychain. The rain dripped into the keyhole through the eaves, making a slight ding sound. My hands were sweaty as I held the brass keys as Jack's car drove over the puddles. The cross on the end of the key flickered as the wipers swung, like a hint of something being swollen by rain. "The altar lock," he said suddenly. The sound of the windshield wipers, unable to mask the grinding of his teeth. "I went to the church last week to collect evidence, and the shape of the keyhole and this key." "Stop." I patted the back of his hand. The car braked suddenly in front of the iron gate of the church. The pointed cross looked like a rusty nail in the rain. The church door was not locked. We crouched and entered the side aisle with flashlights. A corner of the altar curtain was lifted by the wind, revealing a half-person-high wooden cabinet underneath. Jack inserted the key and the sound of the lock turning was louder than his heartbeat. There was a trapdoor behind the wooden cabinet. Smell of mold mixed with damp earth surged up, and I felt for the switch at the base of the wall. Dim light bulbs lit up one after another. It was a cellar, and all four walls were covered with newspaper clippings. Serial murder scene photos. I stood on tiptoe and tore off a photo. The word witness was marked in red pen on the corner of the photo. Further up was Lena's high school ID photo, and next to it was an older photo, a woman in a white coat standing at the door of the psychological counseling room, with Isabel Chen written on her name tag. Written in lipstick below the photo were the words "Save me" or "Let me be you." She has known Lena for a long time. Jack's flashlight shone on Isabel's face, and Scar twitched. In high school, there was a click in the corner of the cellar. I turned around and saw an old-fashioned tape recorder with dusty keys. When I pressed the play button, the sound of electricity came out first, followed by a woman's voice, as if soaked in water. She said she needed an outlet, so I gave her two choices: disappear or become someone else. I took a half step back and my lower back hit the wall. It was Isabel's voice, softer than the recording in the archives, as if she was coaxing a child. "Lara will stand in the light for you, Lena. You just need to fall asleep." Inducing splitting. I pinched my cuffs. "She is teaching Lena how to be two people. Pull over." A male voice suddenly sounded behind me. Jack and I turned around at the same time. Songin huddled at the stairs, his raincoat dripping with water. "I followed your car." His Adam's apple moved. Isabel came to the theater for the last time a week before the murder. She held a stack of scripts and said this was the final act. "Script?" Jack narrowed his eyes. She flipped through the pages and smiled, saying, "The audience must believe that the protagonist must die so that the stand-in can live." Song-An took off his rain-soaked hat. I thought it was a new play. Now I understand she was teaching Lena how to act. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "This is the photo Anand sent. The supplemental page of the autopsy report. Flunitrazepam was detected in the victim's stomach contents, and the dose is enough to make an adult male comatose for 6 hours. Lena drugged him." I stared at the report. She calculated the time so that he would disappear from the safe house that night. He couldn't wake up at all. Jack flashed his flashlight across the mirror in the corner. The mirror cracked into spider webs, and when I moved closer, I could see my face reflected in the cracks. "You thought you were looking for the truth." I looked up suddenly. The voice seeped out from the mirror, like fingernails scratching glass. "Actually, you are looking for yourself." "Voila!" I spoke into the mirror, my breath condensing into white mist on the surface. No answer. I fished out my diary from the theater and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket. When I turned around, I saw an extra shadow in the reflection of the mirror, just behind my left shoulder. The blurry outline had a curved mouth. "Let's go." Jack pulled my arm. "Something's wrong here." The rain had eased a little as we emerged from the church. I sat in the passenger seat and my phone vibrated again. The screen lit up and displayed Nita Sumkar. "Answer it." Jack inserted the key. I pressed the answer button and heard only rapid breathing, followed by Nita's trembling voice. "Miss Pelova, I need to see you. Now." "Address?" "Rose Garden Flower Shop." She sniffed. "I'll meet you at the back door." The moment the phone was hung up, I saw a dark shadow flash by on the cross, on the church spire in the rearview mirror. The breathing sound on the phone was like a leaky bellows. I squeezed the phone tightly. Neat. I know where Lena is hiding. Her voice was torn apart by the sound of rain. But I can't tell you. Jack stepped on the accelerator, and the wipers swung wildly. There was a rusty iron chain hanging on the back door of the Rose Garden flower shop. Nita huddled behind the door, her white skirt soaked through and stuck to her legs. In her arms she held a bouquet of black roses, petals caked with mud. Miss Pullover. She handed me the flower, her fingers shaking violently. Smell it. I leaned over. Under the petals was a note with crooked handwriting. 13 Pat Pong Alley. She doesn't want to be found. Why now? I clutched the note. She suddenly grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into the flesh. Someone knocked on my window in the middle of the night yesterday. Her throat tightened. It was Lena's voice. She said, "Nita, you hid really well." The wind suddenly picked up as Jack's car lights swept over. The note flew out from between her fingers, brushed past Nita's hair, and disappeared into the rain. I lunged forward, only to grab a handful of damp cold air. Nita screamed, and the black roses scattered all over the floor. She stared behind me, her pupils shrinking to the point of a needle. "It's her. She's here." I turned around. There was nothing but the reflection of the stagnant water at the entrance of the alley. "Send her to the police station." Jack took off his coat and wrapped Nita. Let the forensic doctor examine the injury on her wrist. When Nita was taken away, she was still muttering, "That bouquet of flowers is my brother's favorite variety." At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was eating a cold sandwich in the bureau when Tony suddenly burst open the office door. The collar of his uniform was open, revealing a red mark on his collarbone, as if scratched by fingernails. "I have something for you." He slammed his phone on the table. The screen lit up with blurry dashcam video. The picture shows the iron fence of the safe house. On a rainy night, a figure in a black dress walked along the wall, with her long hair hanging down to cover her face. She paused for 3 seconds under the window, raised her hand and knocked on the glass. Exactly the same action Nita described. I thought it was an illusion. Tony's Adam's apple moved. 3 days before the incident, I was on night shift and saw her standing in the yard. After receiving the money, he suddenly covered his face. I was greedy. I deserved to die. At the end of the video, the woman in the black dress turns and walks towards the street. The street lamp illuminates her silhouette. It is Lena. She didn't disappear that day. I held the phone tightly. She just changed her clothes and walked out of the safe house openly. The closing press conference was scheduled for the next morning. Song Kai's speech was pressed against the paperweight, and the corners were curled. He glanced at the report I handed over and pushed up his glasses. "It's too complicated. Profiling cannot be used as evidence." "I know," I nodded. "I'll change it." But there was only one line of words on the case report submitted. "The real criminal is loneliness." Songka's face turned pale. Late at night, when the rain had stopped, I stood on the steps of the Seance Theatre. The moss was as slippery as oil and stuck to the soles of my shoes. A corner of the curtain was lifted by the wind, revealing the faded red velvet underneath. "Miss Pullover." The voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw an empty auditorium with bird droppings all over the seats. "Thank you for coming to my last show." This time it's the left side. I reached for the stun gun at my waist, and my fingers felt the cold metal. The curtain suddenly shook violently, as if someone was running behind it. When I rushed over, I only picked up half a torn script. "Rebirth. She's saying goodbye to you." Jack's voice came from the theater door. He was leaning against the door frame, an unlit cigarette in his hand. "How do you know?" "Look." He pointed to the center of the stage. There was a circle drawn with chalk, and in it was a black rose, exactly the same as the one in Nita's arms. The day I left Bangkok, Jack drove me to the airport. and I asked him to stop the car when we passed the abandoned church. The diary was spread out in the center of the stage, and the wind blew the pages away. The title on the last page was crossed out, with the ink of the new words still wet. Rebirth. There was a line of small words next to it. Vara is awake. This time it's my turn to hide in the shadows. The church bells rang. The first ray of sunlight passed through the stained glass window and shone on the word rebirth, like a handful of gold powder. "Want to take it with you?" Jack asked. I shook my head. It should be left where it belongs. As the car drove out, the church became smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. I felt in the inside pocket of my coat. There was a half-torn script there, with dried blood on the edges. "Will you still cooperate with us on the next case?" Jack suddenly said. I laughed. "It depends on whether you are willing to believe the profile." He snorted and slapped the cigarette box on my leg. "First, teach me how to find fingerprints on coffee cups." The sound of the engine drowned out the sound of the bell. I looked at the rain clouds flying outside the window, and suddenly remembered what Lena wrote in her diary. "Every actor needs an audience. Thanks for being my audience, Jane." The wind blew in through the car window and lifted the boarding pass in my hand. There is a line of pencil writing on the back, written at some unknown time. I will perform more perfectly in the next scene. The sunlight is so bright that I can't open my eyes. I stuffed the boarding pass into my bag and touched the note at the bottom. No, 13. Pat Pong Swai. It was wrinkled by the rain, but the words were still clearly visible. She didn't want to be found, but I know we will meet again. That's the end of tonight's story. Thank you for listening. Have a good sleep. Good night, dear wanderer.